first meeting we've had since the end of the last financial year. So just in terms of formally reporting back, I'm pleased to confirm that board members will recall that we had a target of 40 million to spend in the last financial year. And we'd set ourselves an additional target to make sure that not only did we fulfill the 40 million target, we would also look to increase spend to fulfill any outstanding underspend from the previous few years. So at the end of the last financial year, I can confirm that we have spent all of that 40 million plus the underspend. So we're now at the balance that you would expect in the programme. So, you know, from the perspective of where we started a few years back, where we were carrying significant underspends to the extent of 32 million in 1 year, to get to the position now where we've spent 46 million, including back underspends, I think is a good, in a really strong position for the programme. So I'd just like to thank everyone in terms of their part within that, and particularly Sarah and Tom in terms of pushing projects to make sure that we delivered on time. In terms of how that relates with our annual performance, we've also had confirmation from government on our annual performance review of 2019-20, which confirmed that whereas previously we had a requires improvement on our delivery, we were now rated as being good, in inverted commas, in terms of the scorecard from government. So that reflects the hard work that's gone into increasing the performance on delivery and making sure that we delivered the programme as we said we would. In terms of outputs, we're still waiting for final returns, and we'll bring the final projection back in June. So Sarah and Tom are working through those at the moment. There's a slightly longer turnaround time to bring in the outputs back, but hopefully we'll be in a position to report that back in June. So before I move on to this year's programme, I'd just A, stop for any comments, and B, ask Tom or Sarah if there's anything they'd like to add.
Nothing further from me in terms of that, so that's fine. Sorry, I've just been trying to add people so then they can chat. So Christine, do you want to check if you can facilitate the use of the chat now, because I think I may have resolved it. If not, apologies. But so I mean, do you want me to carry on from where we were in terms of the paper, and I don't know how you'd prefer me to go through this on an individual project by project basis, or
so if I just do an overview in terms of the programme, and then rather than go through the individual projects, I think we'll just look at them in the collective. This year's programme.
Can I just come in for just a minute then, just to recognise and to thank everybody for the delivery moving forward in terms of goods. So that really does only happen because we all work collectively on both the programmes and to support each other in delivering them as well. So I just want to put that on record and say thanks to the team, but most importantly, thanks to everyone both on the board and the supporters within their various organisations. So thank you.
Moving on to this financial year, the very fact that we are all where we are is a reflection of the situation we're in, and clearly that has also had an impact in terms of some of the projects within the programme. What we're working to do at the moment is understand the full impact of COVID on delivery. We know from a construction perspective there have been challenges in terms of access to sites, trying to maintain social distance, issues around supply chain delivery around certain materials such as plaster and plasterboard, which have been well documented. Bringing all of that together has inevitably had an element of impact on different projects in different ways. So some projects are expecting to continue, and particularly with the announcement of the release of some of the lockdown, we expect that that will change over the coming weeks. What we will continue to do with work with each individual project to understand the impacts and bring back a mitigation for the individual projects, but the collective programme. We're still working to a position where the deadline for this year is March 21. And whilst we'll continue to work with our central government colleagues, the expectation is that deadline is unlikely to shift. Therefore, there is still a requirement for us at a programme level to make sure that projects are delivered to time and to the budget that's been agreed. And therefore, what we'll do is make sure that as we understand the impact, we look at what the individual mitigation might be, and then highlight the impact on the programme overall. So we've highlighted within the board report the individual projects and where there might be an impact. It's not necessarily a case that every project will have an impact. Some will be impacted more than others. And our job is to make sure that we understand that impact and bring back the mitigation. I think we do need to stress at this point in time, having just reflected that last year's performance, you know, after many years, we pulled back and, you know, managed to deliver our programme on time, and therefore put our programme position in a stronger starting point. we do still have the challenge now that the programme is due to end at the end of this year. Notwithstanding that we are in slightly different circumstances, what we need to make sure that is that we work with those projects to deliver to the timetable, and where there is a risk, we will highlight that and bring that back to the main board. So Elizabeth, is there anything you'd like to comment here before I ask Tom for any details?
Thanks, Sajida. Yeah, I think just to reiterate what you've said, I mean, the government have been very clear that we should be meeting our deadlines. So I would be just requesting that any programme that thinks they have a risk and needs to mitigate it, that they're looking at the mitigation of it, because there's going to be little flexibility, and we want to make sure that we move forward to close the programmes down as effectively as we possibly can, yeah, and to ensure that they go to completion throughout this year and next year. Yeah. Okay.
So we've included within the report the impact on individual projects. So rather than go through them now, given that we are probably at the start of understanding the full impact, and hopefully in the coming weeks we'll have a better idea of what that might mean. I just take any comments on the individual projects, and we'll bring back more details in June. And then in that case, Tom, is there anything you wanted to add on the programme level rather than on the individuals?
Yeah, so just a couple of things really. So as you'd imagine, we're keeping in regular contact with projects, and sort of these are the most live, up-to-date positions that we could get. We spoke with projects on Thursday before the weekend to make sure that these were still relevant, and they are. Just to echo Sajida, really, very early days in terms of understanding impact. So we're still, we'll bring that back more in June when we've got a greater understanding of projects and they've had time to look at that. In most instances, though, where projects can, they are still looking to proceed. And that's one thing we've noticed. So in the pre-construction phases, people are still continuing to bring forward business cases at the same rate at which we thought they would. Or minor delays, so we'll emphasise that in the milestones paper, but it shows that people are still working well, and again, where possible, people are still continuing on site and making some good progress in some areas. So it's a change of working, but not necessarily an all-out shutdown in most areas. So yeah, that's about it from me really, in terms of nothing on top of what you were going to say. So.
Thank you, Tom. The one thing I will add is, in terms of the deadline for this financial year, given that we have to deliver the programme and commit it and spend by the March 21 deadline, we are aiming to bring as many projects forward as possible between June and July in order to make sure that we can deliver that to that timeline. And if there's any project that will be delayed significantly and can't commit to deliver by March 31st of March 2021, we will highlight that back, because I think that would be a risk to commit a project where there's uncertainty for delivery, given that we're not in a position yet to commit any extensions. So our main progress will be through June and July to commit as many projects by September, because that takes us into the midpoint review with government, and we're expecting a midpoint review in September. And at that point, government have asked all LEPs to demonstrate that they can deliver, and we'll be looking at the programme to ensure that we're on track with the commitment, but also the spend. So it's not just what we've contracted, but also what can we physically deliver in terms of expenditure by March 21. So those will be our timelines, as much as we can commit before September, but also demonstrate progress on spend by March, but also what we can physically spend before September. So we don't risk any programme expenditure not being committed to D2N2. That's all from me, Elizabeth.
Okay, thanks. Any questions at all, or any comments from Sajida? So Joe Bradley, Joe has just asked, do we have a pipeline, Sajida?
So the pipeline that we have is what the board have already agreed, and that's essentially the milestones. In Sarah's next paper, she'll give us a position update on what that means for the programme. We are over programmed, I believe, Sarah, by just over £2 million, so that gives us a buffer. As we continue to review the programme in June and particularly July, if we feel that there's particular projects that we feel can't be delivered, then clearly we will need to revisit that pipeline. But at the moment, the pipeline is what the board approved at its last meeting, which gives us a buffer of just over 2 million.
Thanks. Chris Henning from Nottingham City, you got some comments?
Yeah, thank you. So helpful. Looking at the program level, some projects are going to be impacted because of time issues, and that's simply going to be a kind of potentially cash flow issue. A little bit of delay there, might be quite minor to sort out. Others, actually, COVID may well have altered fundamentally the business case around what continues. We might not know that for quite a while. I think what the board should be taking a view on is how it treats those things, both within its own resources, but also in understanding what the ask is to government. Potentially, government will be in a position where it is thinking about how to pump prime the economy, how to using the mechanisms it has to put money into projects. And as an investment board, what's our view on that? Are we going to be, and it relates to the question about pipelines, are we going to be asking simply for more money to complete projects which have cash flow issues, or are we going to be looking at different ways of funding projects where the business cases have changed?
So Chris, if I can come back, and I think the government have been quite clear thus far, which is there's no extension and no further funds, right? So that's their clear position, and I think that is, as you say, consistent with their message that they want to get things and to keep things moving. What I think Sajida has said is by June we'll have a better picture. But if programmes are going to be fundamentally changed and their business case has fundamentally changed, then they'll have to come back to the board as we would have done previously. And if the business case no longer stacks up because of that, then we'll have to take a different view. And that then brings us back to the pipeline, because we've had a number of cases for different reasons, haven't been able to meet their original business case, their business timeline, and we've had to pull those programs and replace them with ones that could meet our deadlines. So I think it's really important through these next weeks to stay very close to that, and for programs to be thinking about how they mitigate, rather than expecting that there'll be an extension of time or there'll be further funds available. So the starting point is, there's no extension and there's no, from the funding's being spent, and there's no mitigation coming through from government. And therefore, how can those programmes mitigate? And if they don't believe they can, then they should be coming back to us and say this programme is now at significant risk. And that's how we do it. So I don't think it changes our procedure, but it gives us a clearer picture of what, we need that picture by June. I'm happy to take any other comments or questions on that. Or Chris, do you want to come back?
No, that's a clear message, Elizabeth. I think there may well be a discussion in future with the government which actually says, so we've said there's no more money, but there will be money. So actually preparing for that conversation is a sensible thing for this board to do.
I agree with you, Chris. And actually at the network board, we're doing that and having those conversations with government pretty regularly. One of the upsides, if you like, of unable to go into Parliament is ministers and others are more available for these type of meetings, which has been helpful. And we're setting up some more of these meetings. Okay, anybody else want to build or comment on, come back on what I've said? No. Thank you, in which case we'll go to item 5. I think that's Sarah, is it?
Yep. In line with pretty much what we've been saying, the budget paper is now based on the final year, which is the final allocation. So something new just to draw your attention to. So we've now added those projects that we approved last time. So those are now at the bottom. So you've got Mushroom Farm, the facility for Omics, Crocus Place and Top Wighay Farm. So the ones slightly above those were the ones that we approved earlier in the year, in the January. So you can just see those, what we mentioned earlier that we called pipeline projects. They're now officially on the programme, and draw to your attention the figure at the bottom right, which is the overcommitment of the 2.26 million. So we are over programmed at the moment. Just a reminder, we were using the Growing Places Fund to fund that. Obviously, that is a little bit of a buffer going on previous conversations. So also, just as well, you can see now that now in the final year, there's not actually that many projects that have actually got expenditure in this year. So they sort of start at the Nottingham Hub city enabling works and go down to HS2 strategic sites. So we're in close communication with those projects in particular to try and help them and help us understand what expenditure they're going to have this year, any delays. We've obviously got profiles in grant offer letters where we'd made assumptions before all this, and probably not until Q1's return, probably maybe even Q2, that we'll get a full assessment really of where people are. So I say those ones we're particularly in contact with, and also obviously the ones that are coming through.
Okay, any comments or questions for Sarah? We're coming on to look at some projects in detail. Yep, so I'll move on then to item 6 on the milestones update. Tom, is that for you?
Yeah, that's me. So I'll just run through these in order of the paper and go through them as we are. I'll keep it to my input, I think, rather than the usual way in which we do this at the physical meetings. So Beckett, well, can
I just ask if any of the project owners or sponsors are here and they have anything different to say or want to highlight anything, then please do. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, so Beckett, well, we're still looking towards a final business case approval later on in this year. Detail down there is December. The difference with this one is the allocation's already utilised through the pre-compliance agreement, so it's about getting the planning permissions and the decisions around that development through, which is vital to this project. After speaking with the project sponsor, we are still confident that they are working towards these dates. They are still engaging even in the present circumstances, so no real change from that project in particular. The next one's Castle Ward. So again, spoke with the project sponsor late last week. Everything's progressing ahead as thought on that project, so we are still confident of the June 2020 business case delivery and approval by this board. So we are expecting the business case to come in probably within the next week or so. So we know it's being drafted and we know it's coming to a conclusion on that. So again, good progress with regards to the Castle Ward project. The Woodville Swadlincote regeneration route. So the contractor's procurement is just finishing off towards the end of this month. We spoke with Derbyshire County Council in detail about this project. So they are hoping for two things which get the project through to final business case delivery. One is the procurement to be finalised, and two is the Secretary of State sign off for the compulsory purchase order process. Otherwise, we've had the business case delivered to us already. It's been largely assessed and been through value for money assessment and everything, and it's fine from that point of view. So it is just those two outstanding details to fulfil, and then we'll bring that to the June meeting. So confident with that project still. The A46 corridor, phase 3. So we are currently engaging with Rushcliffe Borough Council about this project. As you see, the approval to the board was originally November 2020, which is quite late on in the programme, and in light of the discussion that Sajida had at the start of the meeting about the dates for projects coming forward, we will engage with the Borough Council on this one, I think, and try and see if there is any scope for the timeline to come forward to give us more certainty over spend. In terms of the project's total development cost, our local growth fund contribution isn't actually that big, so we are confident that they will be able to utilise it. But I think for our comfort, and especially in the present circumstances, I think we'd want to try and accelerate that project forward to at least September. So there's the Heathcote Immersive Incubator project with Nottingham City Council. I spoke with the project sponsor about this one. There's been some minor delays to the milestones that we had. So the tender process was supposed to begin in April. That will now begin in May, and they should receive the tenders for this project in July. Again, we are still confident, and after speaking to the project sponsor, that they will be able to utilise our allocation within this time. So we'll continue to work with them and bring forward that business case to the meeting as soon as possible. So yeah, that one again, Heathcote, we're looking okay on that. The Smarter Connected Campus, Nottingham University on the Clifton site. So we're working towards the same timescales as we thought on this project. Nothing has slipped from NTU's perspective. So they're still working towards the design to be complete in June, procurement complete in August, and then the build contract to begin in September, again with confidence of spend due to the nature of the works that they're doing, that they'll be able to get on site and make sure that these are all put in place by March 21, with our spend being utilised up front. So again, September for an approval board to board, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that forward and spend in the time. The Tolbar House project, which Sarah Washborough Council brought on in January. So tenders went out to contractors in April, so that was complete. We're expecting the contractor to be selected in June, and then the business case to come forward to the board for review in July, with construction mobilising in August. They are currently engaging with contractors through the tendering process about how they'll work with social distancing on this project, because it does throw in some sort of challenges, but nothing that is going to affect the ability to deliver and spend within the timescales that we need. And they're confident that with an August start, even a September start, that they'd be able to deliver what they need to. Then there's the Nursing and Allied Health Provision in Mansfield project, again with Nottingham University, looking to bring forward an approval to the board in June 2020, regular weekly catch-ups with this project. So they began their procurement process, and they're hoping to receive tenders right towards the end of May to select a contractor then. So we should have a business case with us in the next week. Nottingham University have informed me that this is at the very last points of draft and getting sign off, so should be with us, and we are expecting that business case still. Confidence in spend with this one, that they're looking to open the facility for its use actually later in the autumn. So it's not just our dependency that they need to make sure that they spend. It's the fact that they need to be open to be able to utilise the facility and gain those learner numbers. And then we have the Revitalising the Heart of Chesterfield projects. So you can see here the project split into two, with a November 2020 and a July 2020, part of the same project effectively, but split at the original phase. Been informed by Chesterfield Borough Council again that the works are continuing on this at the same rate of pace as we were expecting, and that the construction works will be able to deliver in the timescales that we have, again with confidence to spend. What we are going to do with all these projects, I do get that we are saying that we're confident of spend. We're going out for full forecasts to all the projects to make sure that we do have that proof of spend and the expected timescales that they'll be able to draw down. So that one is continuing to look for a July 2020 approval. The Omics Research Facility at the University of Derby, the tenders published and going out, so we should have the tenders awarded for that one in August 2020, with September the final business case approval date. Due to the nature of this project being equipment purchases, they will spend almost instantly on this, so fully utilise their OGF allocation within the timescales that we see. Mushroom Farm, spoke with Broxtowe Borough Council on Thursday, and they're still, the tenders have gone out to contractors, and they should be receiving them any day, really, for review. They're looking for a June 2020 final business case approval. That's a typo in there, so that should be a June LEP approval rather than a July one. And they're confident that they'll have the business case with us. It's again right at the end of its drafting stage, so it should be with us. And then finally, we have the Crocus Place project, some slight delays towards that one, but we are hoping that we will get a final business case presented to the investment board in June, some details to just clarify on that project. We have had the business case, and again, it's been through our internal processes. So the paper is near enough ready to go. It's just some clarifications to sign off. So we should be expecting that business case to come forward in June.
Okay. Carol, do you want to make any comments about Toolbar? I see you've made it in the chat room, but that's just to confirm that you're moving ahead, I guess.
Yeah, just really confirm that we really are keen to move on, because the building, we're not getting income from the building, so the sooner we get this done. So just to assure you, we'll be pushing on as quickly as we can.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, Crocus Place is a big one because it's a big capital programme for Nottingham City.
Yeah.
Do you know with certainty that this will go ahead with the capital investments required from the city?
So Sajida has been really clear, and you have as well, in terms of asking the question, given how much money might be tied up in this, that the business case is really sound. The risk is very low. We've got an agreement to work with the university on actually putting contracts in place, not just the heads of terms, by the time we come back to the investment board, which is absolutely critical. The big decision, I'll be absolutely honest, that we're looking at the moment is whether it is rational for us to take a £29 million borrowing decision in the light of COVID. And that isn't an easy question to answer, but we need to do that as soon as possible. As soon as we've answered that question, the rest falls into place.
Yeah. And anyway, I can understand that it's a sound business case, but taking that level of debt in these circumstances, I can understand that the council's dilemma, for want of a better expression. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions further from anyone else? So in all of them, I waited till the end. So we are being requested to monitor the progress of the milestones and then acknowledge when the submissions are going to come. You can see that June is going to be an important meeting, not just for us, but for many of the projects that we're bringing to that board. Yeah. So people happy to accept the recommendations? Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Okay, so we then move on to item 7, the investment board. Is this back to you, Tom?
Yes.
Chesterfield, are you doing the introduction?
Yeah, so just to slightly brief us into this paper. So this is a project which was initially part of the A61 corridor programme. That is really a joint project between Derbyshire County Council and Chesterfield Borough Council that they're looking to bring forward. So should be the delivery of a new link road which unlocks employment floor space for development in the Chesterfield Station Master Plan area. So it's sort of closely linked with the project that we approved before with the HS2 strategic sites project, but not a duplication of that, just to make sure. So the Derbyshire and Chesterfield are looking for the approval of a £3.808 million grant to use for this project. And we have Christine Durant and Jim Seymour, who are going to present the business case to us as a board. So let me check whether technology works and doesn't fail us in this instance.
Can I just ask if Councillor Gilby or anyone else wants to add before the team set up, whilst we're getting this set up?
Yeah, I could say something, Elizabeth. I think this is a really good example of a project of how the joint growth unit that Derbyshire County Council and Chesterfield Borough Council have set up has helped bring this project forward quicker than it would have done under normal circumstances, and it's a good example of the type of work that we're doing on many other projects, not just economic development across the county, to keep Derbyshire and Chesterfield moving during the COVID crisis.
Thank you, Tricia. Appreciate that. Barry, do you want to add anything?
Only to underline what Tricia just said, that basically working together with not just Chesterfield, of course, but now with the Vision Derbyshire piece of work that we're doing across the piece, you know, we're hopeful of doing more regeneration pieces like this at pace right across the county, putting together solid business case bids for a range of projects, and just working more closely together in a way that we've perhaps not done so traditionally, and we really need to, particularly in these times, move at pace and make sure that we're bringing infrastructure investments into Derbyshire.
I think this is a great example if we can, and we follow this through to government about how we are working together, and therefore when we are looking for investment we can cite these examples as being across the region, county and district working together, and how we can do that here. So it's an important project for us all in that sense. So thank you for your support, and I guess it's over to your teams to take us through the proposal.
Okay, on that point, Chair, if I may, it's Jim Seymour here, Derbyshire County Council.
Yeah, over to you then. Yeah.
You'll probably have heard the slight rumble of stolen thunder in the background there as the two leaders said some of what I was going to against the title slide. Yes, the image you're looking at is a graphic of the Chesterfield Station Master Plan. So as Tom's flagged up, we fall within the remit of our A61 Growth Corridor strategy, but also within the Station Master Plan. And the Hollis Lane Link Road Phase 1 is a key component of that master plan, alongside the HS2 strategic sites that's been previously approved by the board. There is an important point for me to make there about dependencies. Full delivery of the Chesterfield Station Master Plan absolutely depends on the Hollis Lane Link Road Phase 1, and there's a clue in the name. Phase 2 forms a later component of the Chesterfield Station Master Plan, but there's no dependency in the other direction. The business case we're presenting today stands on its own feet in terms of our ability to deliver Phase 1 of the Link Road and bring forward the outputs associated with that. It justifies its own investment, even though it's part of a much bigger plan. If we could move on, Tom, to slide number 2, I'll only speak very briefly about this one. Clearly we're in unusual circumstances in having to present in this format, so as already been flagged up, myself and Christine will talk the board through the presentation. We might in other circumstances have had a much more substantial team standing in the room, and there's a number of consultants adding their technical expertise and many of the components. But again, the key point I was going to make here is that we fall within the portfolio of projects that's being driven forward by the Joint Growth Board, that brings together leaders and other key decision makers from County Council and Chesterfield Borough Council, and the Joint Growth Unit that is now in place to support that, and that framework applies to delivery and monitoring of the projects, as well as obviously to the important gateway that we're stepping through now today with the board's approval. We'll try to keep our handovers as slick as possible, but I think Christine will take you through the context on the following slide before I come back in again.
Thank you, Jim. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm sure that people are aware about the Chesterfield Station Master Plan did predate the proposal for the station to become an HS2 stop. But obviously the announcement of HS2 stopping at Chesterfield was and is of real significance, and it presents a real opportunity for Northern Derbyshire, and having that announcement just added to the momentum around the delivery and the development of key projects around the station. And the Link Road is one of those crucial parts of public infrastructure that is often needed at the beginning of the delivery of master plans. So the Station Master Plan will bring forward wholesale regeneration and support sustainable economic growth, including housing and commercial development in and around the station, but also in and around the town centre itself, because the Link Road starts to bring traffic relief into the town centre. The master plan also incorporates a significant amount of connectivity improvements for pedestrians, cyclists, public transport, cars, and that will be integrated with some really high quality public realm design. And again, the link road and the first phase of that is an absolute crucial part of that. As I say, it brings significant traffic relief in the town centre, but it also brings a critical southern access to the rail station car park. And that in itself brings and opens up development sites on the southern end of the station, which will start to bring that delivery of that overall master plan and real high quality feel that we want to the station. And also, of course, as Jim has mentioned, the phase 1 of this link road is obviously the very first step to delivering the whole of the link road through up to the front of the station as part of the overall master plan. So I think that sets out that strategic case, and I think I'm handing back to Jim.
So at this point, I'll just describe the geography there. You can see in the location plan, top right of the slide, we're right in the middle of Chesterfield here. The bulk of the town centre sits at the southern edge of the general arrangement drawing you're looking at, and the station forecourt sitting towards the top left of the drawing, alongside the dotted lines representing phase 2 of the Hollis Lane link road. The link road itself sits in what's quite a narrow gap between the Midland Main Line to its east and the A61, which is largely elevated to its west, and running top to bottom through the diagram, east-west on the ground, is the A632 out towards Calo Hospital and Bolsover from the town centre. The Hollis Lane Link Road provides a direct connection from there into the southernmost point of the main Chesterfield Station car park, which brings about some of the initial traffic relief to the town centre that Christine's already mentioned, because actually for most approaches to the station, departures by road, it's a fairly convoluted journey through the town centre, and actually one of the big benefits of the link road brought about through phase 1 is that we can take a lot of that station generated traffic out of the town centre and pretty much straight onto the principal road network. So that's allowing us to bring forward further development as well as the plots directly associated with the link road itself. And worth flagging up again, as Christine's briefly mentioned, there are big benefits here, particularly once phase 2 is in place as well, around bus rail interchange and sustainable travel access to the station. So there's a really important connectivity package alongside the regeneration rationale for the project. I think we'll do another handover at this point and move on to the next slide, if we could, Tom, just for Christine to talk us through the master plan and the plots.
Okay, so the first thing to say is that this slide and plan is a different orientation to the previous. So just so that you can orientate yourself, at the bottom on the right hand side, just to the left of the river is where the actual station building is, and then if you move right to the left hand side, and you can see the red plot on the left, just to the north of that, that is the start of the link road. And those two plots, plot 6 and plot 5, which are kind of long and thin in this orientation, they are the two key plots that start to be released as part of this scheme. Plot 6 is where the builders merchants is that we will be moving, and therefore the majority of that plot will be made available as this scheme is delivered. The other plot that we propose to bring forward and a part of the jobs that would be contracted as part of this project is towards the top right hand side of the slide, which is the blue shaded area, and that is where we would be looking to put an office development, and that plot is owned by the Borough Council. It's largely car parking, temporary car parking at the moment. So those three plots, that is, I don't think you can quite see, but that's plot G in the top right, and then plots 5 and 6 towards the left-hand side, they are the areas where we've identified the job outputs. The other thing to say is the area that is shown bounded in green is what we describe as the Spire neighbourhood within Chesterfield. And again, towards the left-hand side of that, there's an area which we believe will also in time be able to be brought forward for housing development. So again, this scheme will enable the start of that as well. However, we have
at the moment. Sorry, what's in that green space at the moment on the left?
At the moment, a lot of it is either temporary car park, or some of it is old highway that really goes to dead ends, which was brought about by the building of the A61 many years ago. So it's quite an area ready for redevelopment, and it's identified in the local plan as to come forward as a housing area. There is some housing there already, so it gives us a good indication that it's an area that will work well as residential. And I think that yeah, that's all that I needed to cover on this slide. It just was quite difficult to explain the orientation. So there you are. And I think Jim's going to take us through the rest of the business case elements.
Jim, can you also talk about phase 2 to David's question at the end as well, please?
Yes, of course. So yes, I think it's me for the remainder now. So in this slide, just dealing with option assessment, I'll perhaps do the more straightforward bit first. I think going back to the general arrangement drawing, in terms of the highway alignment for the Link Road phase 1, there really aren't any options given the very narrow corridor that it falls within, and the need for us to associate it with some direct bringing forward of plots for commercial development. So really it has to be what it is in terms of the alignment, and also it needs to be capable of serving once phase 2 is in place as an adoptable highway to the design standards that would imply. So really no options with regard to the highway alignment. I'll probably pick up the question about phase 2 timing at this point, just to save me forgetting, if nothing else. We can't, other than saying as soon as possible, give a direct response in terms of when phase 2 will be delivered. It was part of the proposed package for the HS2 strategic sites proposal for the Housing Infrastructure Fund, together with South Derby Growth Zone and the Tottenham Chetwynd campus. Unfortunately, that hasn't been successful, but we have received encouragement to build up a business case for the different components to go through the single Housing Infrastructure Fund beginning in the autumn of this year. So I'm afraid that's all we can say about the certainty of phase 2 at the moment, and clearly the Joint Growth Board will be looking at other options if the SHIF one doesn't come forward. Just with regard to options for the land use development, we did submit an outline business case suggesting mixed use on plots 5 and 6. There's been a lot of further work going on with Chesterfield Borough Council's planners and with property advisors to the Joint Growth Unit, and the full business case is proposing purely commercial use on those 2 plots. So there has been a lot of work done on different mixes, different options, different building heights, that we won't go to in detail, but the outcome of that is the plots that form part of the full business case. We can move on to the next slide, Tom, and apologies just as that's coming up, it's slightly busy, but basically the key elements there are that the gross employment brought forward by those combination of sites, plot 5B, 6B and plot G within the Spire neighbourhoods, falls just under 800 gross jobs. So allowing for deadweight displacement, etc., and leakage outside the D2N2 area, that's estimated to be approximately 550 net jobs. The benefit cost ratio derived by that, just using a standard assessment process, as shown on screen there, against our current outturn cost estimate, would give a benefit cost ratio of just over 13 to 1. We're currently just dealing with some questions from Hatchery Generis just around some of the specification of some of the jobs involved that will actually bring that down to 12.9, but still clearly a very, very healthy benefit cost ratio. And even with the sensitivity analysis that's shown bottom right there, taking into account any optimism bias that's still in place against our outturn costs, we're still at a 9 to 1 ratio, so very, very good value for money. We move on again to where that money's coming from on the next slide, if we could, Tom. It's a pretty straightforward process in terms of the capital funding. I mean, obviously there are lots of other considerations in the background about the bringing forward of the commercial plots across the whole of the station master plan, but effectively we're looking at £7.4 million worth of investment here. We've drawn down some pre-compliance funding, so seeking a balance of approximately 3.5 from LGF, and the Joint Growth Board has already agreed that the gap funding there of £3.6 million gross, of which approximately 1 million has already been spent, more or less in a 50-50 ratio, by the Borough Council acquiring a plot of land that we'll talk about in a minute, and the County Council designing and seeking and obtaining planning consent for the link road. So about £1 million of that gap is already in place, but the Growth Board has agreed that the remainder will be found. If we move on again, please, Tom.
Can I just clarify, when you say the adjacent site land and property, does that mean the county or the borough are acquiring that land?
Essentially plots, the plots we're bringing forward are on land that's currently occupied by Jewston, the builders merchant site, which obviously we need for highway construction on the site. The Borough Council has already bought an alternative site that's been agreed in principle by Jewston that they would be happy to move to, and so that's a significant element of investment already taken place. So clearly the business will move onto a site that's currently owned by the Borough Council. That site will become available to the County Council for highway construction purposes, and then effectively falls within the remit of the Joint Growth Board in terms of bringing forward the associated commercial plots.
Okay,
so
that's clear. Thanks.
Okay, so in terms of the commercial case, again, a pretty straightforward story in terms of highway contractor. There's a standard assessment process that Derbyshire County Council uses for the procurement route for all of its major projects. This one is actually allocated to the arm's length contractor, Highway Construction Services, so it's effectively a county council owned contractor. But that's taken through the standard benchmark process that we use for all similar projects. There is independent advice in place for the commercial plots involved, that there is a market for them, and I think that is illustrated by the market that's currently being fulfilled by the Borough Council elsewhere, the town centre, on the Northern Gateway Innovation Centre that's under construction at the moment. So we're confident that there is a market there in the town for commercial plots of this nature. So again, if we could just move on, Tom, to the final main slide around the management case, and the infrastructure, say on the slide, is designed subject to any details that come back through the preparation and delivery programme. So it's essentially ready to deliver. Its planning consent is in place, the contractor is appointed, and there is a standard monitoring and change management process in place in the background as one of the County Council's major projects for delivery. As you've already highlighted, Chair, there's a key dependency with regard to moving the business occupied by Jewson onto an alternative site. That site clearly was bought by the Borough Council in the knowledge that in principle Jewson are happy to make that move. And whilst we don't yet have the documentation in place that is definitely happening, there's very rapid progress being made now towards heads of terms being put in place for it. Jewson's own agents are cooperating very actively in the wording of those heads of terms, so we do expect those to have those in place. I'll use the word imminently. Certainly, you know, we're talking about a process of days or weeks.
So, sorry, Jim, to jump in. I was going to say at the end of the presentation, but it's probably a better time to say it now. We are working to the fact, as you'll see in the recommendation for this business case, that the heads of terms for this are agreed, and until they are agreed, sorry, they're not agreed at this point in time, but until they are agreed, we won't enter into formal contracting with Derbyshire County Council and Chesterfield on this business case. So this project is coming forward for approval, subject to those heads of terms being agreed, and they need to be agreed in the next 30 days is the deadline we're putting on it. Otherwise, the project comes back to this investment board, and the decision on where it goes from there is done after that.
So, and I'll just, for clarification, that is absolutely understood and accepted by us as promoters of the project.
But from what I hear, Jim, you don't see any blockages or any hurdles. It's just a question of the process going to completion now.
We have active cooperation from Jewson and their agents in the process. So clearly nothing's certain until it's certain, but we do expect the heads of terms to be signed any time now, to be honest. And then obviously it's a question of moving it further through the legal process.
Fantastic, thank you.
And then just to finish on this slide, and obviously this overlaps with previous discussion about COVID-19. I mean, clearly we've presented what to all intents and purposes is a pre-COVID business case, but actually in terms of our delivery of the outputs of the project, in terms of relocation of Jewson and construction of the phase 1 of the Hollis Lane Link Road, we are at relatively low risk as it stands at the moment in terms of, particularly in terms of the LGF spend, which is largely taken up with the land acquisition and preparation of the alternative site, which is largely work that's carried on outdoors. However, clearly in terms of that and the delivery of the commercial plots, as I think to borrow a phrase used earlier on by Tom, you know, it's early days, and clearly the project will need to be kept under review as it moves forward. But again, just to reiterate, as in terms of our ability to spend the LGF and to get those key components in place, it appears to be a relatively low risk at this point.
Okay.
So I think if we move on to the final slide, if we could, Tom, and it was only really just to reiterate that we're really pleased to be able to present the case to the board today. This key component of the Chesterfield Station Master Plan. It's a good, strong project in its own right, but it will unlock so much more that can be brought forward through future phases of the Station Master Plan. I know we've picked up a few questions along the way there, but obviously Christine and myself will be happy to pick any others now. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jim and to Christine for the work just in getting the project to this stage, but also presenting today. David Williams from the LET, do you want to come in with a comment or question?
No, I think I've made it in the print there. I mean, heads of terms are just waffle, really. It's getting to the contracts that you need to do, and given the timing, sooner you start getting on with the contracts rather than the heads, the better, I think.
Yeah. So you're just encouraging them to escalate, to accelerate it. I think we would encourage you to do that. Yeah. Any other comments or questions from any of the board members? Yep. So if that's the case, the paper's quite comprehensive, and Jim and Christine's presentation brought much more colour to it. So thank you for that. So we're being asked to approve the recommendation for the grant. So approve the grant subject to those signed heads of terms. But as David said, we'd encourage you to move quickly to legal so that you can move the project forward. Yeah. So approval, can I have a sense of it, please?
Yeah.
If people could approve, that'd be great. Okay, it's an important paper for us to approve, so if you could just note your approval on the chat room, that would be helpful for the board members. Okay, thank you very much. It's approved. Good luck, and hopefully the next few days you will be able to move it forward at pace. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
So we're now moving on to item 8. I think, Tom, are you doing an introduction before you introduce the additional speakers?
Yeah, just do a quick one on this. So this is the Top Wighay Farm project, which actually came on at the last investment board meeting as part of the pipeline projects. This is a Nottinghamshire County Council led scheme where it's road infrastructure to unlock a housing development in is it in Gedling? Sorry. So yeah, in Gedling Borough. So we've got Andy Evans from Nottinghamshire County Council who is going to present this to the investment board, and they're requesting £3 million of local growth funding towards the project. So just to clarify and not have to intervene throughout the presentation, there aren't any conditions to this approval like there were in the last one. So it's just a plain approval for the £3 million worth of funding. So I'll just share my screen, and then Andy, if you want to go ahead.
Andy, could you just introduce yourself to the board, please, or and the other speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Andy Evans from Nottinghamshire County Council, and I'm the programme director for a number of projects from housing regeneration across Nottinghamshire. And I particularly got the lead on the Top Wighay Farm project. So you're getting it in effect from the horse's mouth this morning. So thank you to Tom for driving. That helps me immensely because my IT skills are challenged in this day and age, but I'll rely on Tom to drive me through the programme. Just if I could start off then, Chair. What I'm going to do today is we've obviously submitted the full business case, which is compliant with the local assurance framework. We followed the HM Treasury Green Book and the 5 cases. But I'm just going to try and bring the project to life for the board, to give you a feel for the project, give you a taste of what the future looks like when it comes to the project as well. So I'm going to take you through a number of issues, but I'll finish up with a question and answer session at the end. And I'll importantly cover off a number of risks that the board have flagged up this morning, and Jim and Christine colleagues touched on those sort of issues previously. And I'll make sure I'm fairly implicit in those risks and how they may or may not affect this project. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Tom. Just to put the site in context, it really sits at the heart of the D2N2 area, sitting just north of Nottingham City, and as Tom said, sits within Gedling Borough Council's area, just to the outskirts of Hucknall town. It's very close to the M1 motorway, as you can see, so strategically quite an important site. It's a sustainable urban extension. It's got the policy compliance within the aligned core strategy of 2014. And it's got its own supplementary planning document, which was approved by the Borough Council in 2017. So in terms of all the policy situation from a strategic context, it's got all the planning policy compliance it requires. What we're trying to do in terms of opening up the site's been in play for quite some time and needs to be brought forward. And I'll touch on why it hasn't come forward previously, because that's an important factor for this business case. What we're planning to do in terms of the infrastructure, which has got planning permission, and that was granted in January 2020, is to bring a secondary site access, which is a traffic lighting control access, and a new access from the roundabout, which is shown on this slide, which will basically give you a loop road that will take you into the site and back out. So there are two ways to access and egress the site. Tom, next slide, please. Touching on demand, I mentioned the aligned course structure in the local plan. This is fundamentally a major site in the borough. It's a major site within Nottinghamshire itself. It's allocated for 805 houses, but also in the local plan there's a safeguarded area of land just to the north and wraps around the site, which in the future, in 10 years' time, will potentially bring forward another 1,000 housing units into the area. So it's key in terms of the housing growth figures. It's key in terms of employment space. So it's a major proposal for the area sitting, as I said, in the heart of the D2N2 area. Next slide, please, Tom. We have submitted an outline plan application to the Borough Council. I mentioned, just to be clear in terms of planning, the highway elements of the A611, they have got planning permission, that's in place. Now the wider site, and this is shown by the illustrated master plan, and I'll talk the board through that shortly. This will be granted planning permission, hopefully by the Borough Council, for the wider development. So what we're looking at in terms of the public sector intervention is de-risking the scheme to allow and enable the development world and the residential builders to come forward and develop out the site. This illustrative master plan is a core element of the design and access statement that's been submitted with the plan application, full plan application to the Borough Council, and that was submitted in January of this year. So we're moving key elements of the development process forward. It's not great in terms of the colours that it's shown, so apologies to the board on that, but fundamentally the site looks to deliver a sustainable and integrated community in effect. The pink area is employment land, the yellowish areas are the residential parcels. There's a site, a sort of bluish green area right at the very heart of this village, this proposed new village, which is for a 1.5 entry primary school. And just touching on that, is a local centre, which will be a commercial centre for retail, for creche, medical facilities, those sorts of local facilities to keep this as sustainable. And just to the north of the school site, you'll see substantial green space as well. So we want to integrate that into the open countryside, and we want to provide community facilities. So this is really a living, breathing community in its own right, and which, as we mentioned earlier, COVID-19, one of the key things we want to build, and we will build because this is part of the master plan, is a detailed walking, cycling route and lots of green open space, which is fundamental to a development of this nature. Moving on, please, Tom. It's important for me to touch on the partners. The key thing in terms of land ownership is the County Council owns the entirety of the site, and it's pledged through its policy committee to provide funding to move this forward. The main funder is Homes England, and we've got in place 5.8 million to move the scheme forward. That's tied up legally with a grant funding agreement that both parties have signed. Hopefully, D2N2 will today support the scheme and be a funder as well. And importantly, we've got the support, obviously, through Gedling Borough Council, the local plan authority. And we've also been working very closely with the officers of Gedling Borough Council to bring this funding package together. Joe Davis, importantly from regeneration side, Joe Gray from local plan to get the planning policy in place, Alison Bennett from economic development, and now we're working very closely with Mike Avery from the development management point of view in terms of moving forward from getting planning permission in place. Also, there's support at the politicians level with Councillor Hollinsworth, who's got a portfolio for growth and regeneration supporting the project, and importantly, the leader of the council, Councillor John Clark, on this board, support as well in place. So that's very, very important in terms of the two authorities and particularly the planning authority role in moving this project forward. We've also put there a slide related to Balfour Beatty. Balfour Beatty are the contractor that we've we've appointed, and we want to work in collaboration with Balfour Beatty for reasons. It's not just about delivering the contract, but also adding social value into the local area as well. So the fundamental relationship about it's a more collaborative approach in terms of the way we contract than a command and control, if that's the right phrase, how we work within the contractor world. Also, I think it's key to point out now to the board, the council itself, while we've been involved with bringing in the infrastructure, clearly working with Balfour Beatty, we're also securing the development partner to build out the residential units, and we've already commenced that process, and we've gone out to expressions of interest, and we've quite pleasingly and quite which gives us comfort, we've got 10 signed up formal interest from residential developers. We've had some concern, obviously, as we all have within the board, of would the development industry be interested in this given the current COVID crisis, but they've come back and said we're really interested in this, and now we're moving forward to the next stage, which is the ITT stage. So that process is moving forward to secure the residential development partner, and I'm pleased to say we've got some really significant names, which I can't share with the board at the moment, unfortunately, because we're in a procurement process. But as soon as we can, obviously, we'll bring that to the attention of the board. Next slide, please, Tom. I just wanted to touch on funding. I've mentioned earlier in terms of contributions, but I think this chart shows you the 10.3 million of the total package to de-risk this scheme, how that breaks down into the 5.8 from Homes England already secured, the 1.5 already secured from the county council, and hopefully again today we could hopefully look forward to securing 3 million from the LEP. The slide itself shows the return to the public sector. It shows the strong value for money, and the analysis that Hatchery Genesis has carried out to show this is really high value for money. I think I'll take a moment to just touch on, well, why do we need public sector intervention? It looks quite healthy. Well, we've carried out a full development appraisal that's been submitted as part of the full business case, and that shows with the intervention from the public sector, it will deliver a profit to the residential developer of just over 16%. Now, the development industry looks to return a profit between 15 and 20%, 20% particularly if the scheme is risky. But with the public sector intervention de-risking the upfront costs, it brings that profit to 16, which is acceptable. If that 10.3 injection wasn't in place, it puts that project profit, it drops it to 8%, which is unviable. So without public sector intervention, this scheme wouldn't be viable, hence why it's not come forward in the past. Now, why is that so? Well, the development industry would have to put at least 10 million in this scheme before it gets any return whatsoever. So it's a massive risk to just inject 10 million without any certainty. It's also quite a high expectation in terms of policy compliance to deliver SIL and Section 106 contributions, which is the key element of that contribution is 30% affordable housing. So this scheme that we're presenting today is policy compliant. It will deliver 30% affordable housing. It will deliver the jobs. It will deliver the SIL expectations, etc. So that's fundamentally why this public sector intervention from the three parties that have been proposed is important to stimulate and act as a catalyst to bring this development forward. And without that intervention, this scheme will probably sit there, not being developed yet again. Next slide, please, Tom. So I've touched on a number of these. In terms of the outcomes, it's a sustainable urban extension. The big driver, this is a residential scheme predominantly, but it will bring forward B1 office development and some logistics development as well. It brings forward a commercial centre, a school, a sustainable urban drainage scheme, plus the walking and cycling routes that I mentioned. We flagged up here that it's going to deliver 157 direct construction jobs. This is over roughly a 10-year period. So this is a long-term project as well. So it's going to bring quite a significant number of construction jobs into the area. And again, working with the developers and working with Balfour Beatty on the infrastructure side, we want to bring social value into this scheme. And that's very important for us and for our contractors. Tom, can we move to the next slide, please? Hence the slide social value. It's going to be important to bring this project to life. It's going to be important what can we add during that process. It's a shared sense of place. This is about creating place, developing place. It's about delivering that sustainable urban extension. And we will expect social value input from every contractor we work with. And we've worked to put in place KPIs, and we're working in place to put KPIs that we can report and monitor those as the project goes forward over that 8 to 10 year period. Can we have the next slide, please, Tom? Again, about the strategic importance of this site. There are strategic transport benefits. It's close to, Jim and Christine just touched on Chesterfield's HS2 station. It's 30 minutes drive to there. It's 30 minutes drive to Toton HS2. It's close to the M1. It's close to the East Midlands Airport, etc. So it's a really important site in the centre of the D2N2 area. Next slide, please, Tom. Now, that was all the good stuff. Now, you'd expect me to try and skirt around COVID, but I'm not, so I'm going to bring it real to the fore. And I just want to touch with this slide. It just shows the cycle of development we're going through. We've designed the scheme, we've gone out to contractor, we've got planning permission in place. The board, thank you to the board to support the expression of interest on the 9th of March. Sorry, the 11th of May today. Hopefully you'll support as well. The construction, we're hoping to start, well, we signed the contract, so it will start on the 25th of May. The Balfour Beatty, we've been in close contact, as you can imagine, with them about this right the way through as soon as we've got indications there was an issue. They've signed up to the Construction Leadership Council rules and regulations that for social distancing, and more importantly, they've got a very strong supply chain network. So the two fundamental areas we were concerned with, they've given us comfort in terms of the social distancing that'll take place. And at this stage, it's important you look at this in stages about COVID-19. They are putting infrastructure in place in a very open environment, so they can manage social distances quite comfortably, which is what's significant for us, and it's also a significant issue for the board. Now, in terms of a manageable risk as well, we've identified there where COVID lockdown kicked in. Outline planning permission for the wider development. Let's be clear, that's the wider development, not the infrastructure, because that's already got planning permission. Has been delayed slightly. And I say slightly because the April deadline was set in the case officer's validation letter, and it was quite a stretched target in the first place. We've been informed by the Borough Council that we should hopefully get planning permission in August. We built into the programme we're working to September, so we're within our stretch targets, we're within confines and contingencies we've set in place. And I think it's important to look at the programme that we don't expect housing development itself to start until next year anyway. So hopefully we'll come out of COVID and the side of the development section in terms of the residential development will be kick-started in 2021. We're seeing signs, and I think most board members will have seen signs of the development industry is coming back to sites. A lot of developers, Vistry, Taylor Wimpey, Urban Splashes of this world have basically started reopening a number of their sites today. So that's a real good sign of recovery already. And we're on programme still to deliver the full project by the end of September 2029. Importantly for this board, regarding our programme to deliver the infrastructure by the end of March 2021, we are still on programme to do that. Tom, next slide, please. But you'd expect us to be robust in terms of risk management, and this slide does illustrate what we've got in place. Similar to colleagues who presented earlier, We have a robust Prince 2 approach. This is one of the council's major projects. The blue box looks at the project delivery side. It has me there as the project group chairing that programme. Then we go into the wider council's performance and governance framework, going very much to the member working group, which is chaired by the leader of the council. And also sitting closely on that, it would be amiss for me not to mention Councillor Richard Jackson, who's a member of this this board, obviously. So Councillor Jackson sits closely on that working group, monitoring the performance of some of the key projects that the council is taking forward. So we've got a robust governance approach in place. We've got a highly experienced contractor on board. And important for me to say that as signing up to this this project, Tom's reminded me several times that leading up to this, that any cost overruns will be down to the council itself. So I'm just confirming that that message has got through, Tom. So thank you for that. Next slide, please, Tom. Just to sum up, but before we move into question and answer, I just want to really emphasise this is a strategic growth opportunity, not only driving through employment, but also major housing development. This will deliver for the strategic employment plan for D2N2 a major contribution to your housing delivery. It will deliver 805 units. It's ready to commence. The contract is in place. It's deliverable. It's highly policy compliant for the local plan, and which has been assessed by Hatchery Generous and our own consultants, Amion, that this project offers high value for money. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board, for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to present this morning.
Thank you, Adam. Andy, sorry, very clear and well presented. As you see, it feels like a strong plan. I know that we've got both Councillor Jackson and Councillor Clark here with us. Would they like to see anything before open up to wider questions?
Not a lot to add, Chair, other than that this is deliverable. So it's the site is entirely in the council's ownership, so we can get on with this. And in fact, we want to take some of the office space for our own use, and it's part of our office rationalisation project. So it's something that we need to get on with, and I think in that way we can be a key sort of early tenant of the site, and helping driving others into the site, as well as getting the housing delivered. So it's an exciting project. It's a quality development there, and yeah, grateful for the recommendation to approve today.
Thank you very much, and it feels like a really strong project. Is Councillor Clark with us?
Yes. Yes.
Can
you hear me?
John? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, get it going. I mean, like the rest of the country, I mean, we need to get this place going because the economy is going downhill. So as soon as we can get this this site, along with many other sites and infrastructure, in particular built, particularly the one at Chesterfield, then the country will benefit, and it'll help us get out of this awful situation.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, John. And anybody got any questions for Andy or for anyone else? Any comments? Yeah, so that's a resounding, well, I would assume that therefore that we are all happy to approve this spend at today's meeting. So if you could again just type in your approval or otherwise, if that comes through, then that would be fantastic. I can see that people are approving, Andy, so you can take it that the grant, the monies have been approved. So thank you very much for your presentation and for the reassurance, as much as anything else, that we've got a great scheme here that will deliver and deliver on time in these pretty challenging times that we're in. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Board, and thank you, Tom, as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So we're now going on to the exempt items, so we can stop recording, Tom. Yep.
Yeah, 1 second.